I would say the quality of the relationships that we have in our life are directly connected to the quality of conversations that we can have with those people with whom we have those relationships. So that is why these heart to heart conversations are so important. Because I personally think that the quality of our life, of my life, is directly dependent on the quality of the relationships that I have. You know, I always get really surprised, and in many ways, it's kind of a wake up call when I hear these stories about, someone who had it all, had money, fame, celebrity, status, and then they overdose or they commit suicide. And I just find myself thinking, wow, I mean, it's such a wake up call. It just reminds me that maybe those things they're not what really give us happiness in life, don't really give us joy. So I do think that the quality of life is largely dependent on the quality of the relationships that we have, and the quality of the relationships that we have with people in our lives, be it friends, be it spouses, be it God, is largely dependent on the quality of the conversations that we have with these people. So I wanted to go deeper into this idea of serious conversations, and I found a fantastic outline of 11 points that can assist in crafting these conversations and making sure that they are deep and have good enough quality to give some firm foundation to these different relationships where these conversations come into play. I would really strongly recommend that you get this book and read this book. It is amazing, not only in terms of, say, public speaking or one-to-many communication, but also one-to-one communication. It's got an entire section just about one-to-one communication and the art of speaking and listening in a one-to-one setting, which I think is quite needed in the world today. So I just wanted to go into what he calls the general rules applicable to serious conversation. I just wanted to go through them really quickly, just to give you a sort of, let's call it a preview of them, and maybe to whet your appetite and get you curious enough to actually want to go and get this book and read this book. It's one of the books which I actually have two copies of this book in my bookshelf because I bought one for myself, and then a friend of mine bought one for me also because he'd heard me speaking about it so much that he just bought me one because he didn't realize that I'd already ordered one and it was on the way. Having said that, the 11 rules of heart-to-heart conversations, according to Mortimer Adler. Number 1, pick the right place and occasion for a conversation, one that provides sufficient time for carrying it on and one that is free from the annoyance of distractions that interrupt or divert it. I think a really good rule of thumb when trying to have one of these conversations with someone who is important in our lives is just put your phone away, like put it in another room. It just makes such a huge, massive difference to like have your phone off. I dare say, turn it off and put it in another room. Because a friend of mine once told me, listen, if you're not going to answer your phone, why have it on anyway? I mean, you'll turn it on and get all the notifications you missed of missed calls, missed messages, etc. Right? So why have it on? I thought that made a lot of sense. But I do think that with respect to finding a place that is free from the annoyance of distractions that interrupt or divert a serious conversation, our biggest enemy at the moment is cell phones with instant messaging and notifications and all that. And we just need to put them away. Just don't even have it close by, not even to take notes. Number 2, know in advance what kind of conversation you are trying to have. And then here he gives an example from his other book called How to Read a Book, which is also fantastic. The first rule for reading a book well is to know what kind of book it is that you're trying to read. Reading a novel is a different exercise from reading a history, and both are different from reading a philosophical work or a scientific treatise. As we have seen, serious conversations also differ from one another in the substance of what is to be discussed and in the purpose or aim of the discussion. Be aware of the character of the conversation in which you are going to be engaged. So number 1, cut out distractions. Number 2, be aware that this is going to be a serious conversation. Number 3, for whatever kind of serious conversation it is to be, select the right people with whom to have it. In other words, he's saying don't try and discuss deep stuff with people who are incapable of deep thinking. Don't do it. You'll just find yourself feeling really, really frustrated. Number 4, certain matters are undiscussable and therefore one should avoid discussing them. And here it goes into matters of likes and dislikes, uh, different matters of taste. So it doesn't make sense to, let's say, if you're going to have a serious conversation about what color to paint the baby's room, should it be pink or blue? I don't think that is really a matter of a serious conversation. It's not really going to change anyone's life. So certain matters are undiscussable, especially matters to do with taste. It's really a person just saying, I like this, I don't like this, end of discussion, where no serious life-changing or life-altering decision has to be taken. Number 5, don't listen only to yourself. All of us have had the experience of conversations that proceed in the following manner. Brown speaks while Jones remains silent, not listening to what Brown says, but only waiting politely for Brown to finish, at which time Jones enters the conversation with a statement of something on his mind that may have no relation whatsoever to what Brown has just said. While Jones speaks, Brown also politely waits, but does not listen. When Jones finishes, Brown then expands on what he had said earlier or talks about something else that in no way relates to what Jones has just expressed. We've all been in these situations where you feel the person is not listening to you, or you are so hung up on your own opinion on this particular subject that you're not listening to the other person. You're not really willing to change your thinking or to change your mind, or you're not open to other points of view. So point number 5 is don't listen only to yourself if you want to have a serious, deep conversation about something. Number 6, a closely related rule calls on you to listen to a question with an effort to understand it before answering it, and then with an effort to address yourself to the question in the light of your understanding of it. So one thing a tip which I picked up from Mortimer Adler when it comes to this aspect also is many times if someone asks you a question or puts forward a statement, repeat the statement in your own words and pose it or frame it in a way such as this. Am I correct in saying that you think, etc., etc., etc.? Or am I correct in saying that what you're trying to understand, or what you're trying to get to or unravel is the following? That really helps to clarify things and to make sure that you're listening carefully and engaging your mind with what the other person is saying. 7, he puts forward a parallel rule. If you are on the questioning rather than the answering end of a conversation, ask your questions as clearly and as intelligibly as possible. From my experience, I've found that sometimes it means having to pose the same question 2 or 3 times at least, like reframe it, reword it, rejig it until the other person understands the question. Number 8, there's still one more rule about questions in relation to good, serious conversation. Some people think that they're engaging in conversation when they ask another person one question after another, receiving each answer without commenting on it and without any connection between the questions asked in sequence. This may be a form of interrogation that is useful under certain conditions and for certain purposes, but it is not a conversation in which the interchanges of two-way talk advance significantly from one point to another. I think in this point number 8, one more rule is don't just ask question after question after question. That final sentence where he says two-way talks advances significantly from one point to another, I think this is a hallmark to know whether you've had a serious conversation. Because at the beginning of a serious conversation, you and the other person are in one frame of mind. And at the end of that serious conversation, you have advanced to a different frame of mind. This reminds me of something I read in another book by Mortimer Adler called The Great Ideas, in which he was speaking about the idea of opinion. And then he quoted Aristotle as having said that controversy is important in a democracy. Controversy is important in a democracy because when two people have different points of view and they defend those different points of view, and maybe one is wrong and the other is correct, vice versa, or both are partially correct or partially wrong, what happens is for the person who is correct, they have a deepened understanding of why it is that they are correct. For the person who is wrong, they will be I don't want to use the word educated, that just sounds so like demeaning, but they will be illuminated. They'll have a new understanding. Their error will be corrected. So that's why controversy is important. And I think it really speaks to serious conversations. Serious conversations do sometimes have an element of controversy, but the main point is there's a significant advancement of minds from one point to another. Number one. Number nine, don't interrupt while someone else is speaking. Don't be so impatient to say what is on your mind that you cannot wait for the other person to finish speaking before you say it. Number 10, don't be rude by engaging in a side conversation while someone to whom you're listening is talking. And I think that's what cell phones actually do. So I think this really ties into point number one about pick the right place and a place that won't have distractions. And then number 11 is recognize that anything that takes time should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The same thing applies to serious conversations. This is as true of a conversation as of a play or a symphony. So these serious conversations should have a conclusion. They should have an end. They should have some kind of wrapping up, tying up of strings to be able to say, okay, we agree or we disagree, or we shall discuss this matter further on another day when we have more time to go into it, or after we've done a little bit more research, a little bit more thinking about it. So in summary, I think those 11 rules are fantastic that are put forward in this book in terms of just improving the quality of conversations that we have with our friends, with our families, with our loved ones, with God. And it's important to keep them in mind. And I think if I could just go through them all again and just say the most important one, in my opinion, it's just for me personally, it's that thing of learning to listen to people. Learning to listen to people. It's so difficult. It's so difficult to cut out distractions, to put aside your own opinion, your own point of view, and just be open to what someone else is saying. That takes practice. It's not something that happens overnight. But I do think it's worth it, because what happens is there's a kind of like, sense of growth that starts to happen, to take place. And I think the most important aspect of that, of really listening to someone else, is they sense it. And once someone gets the idea that you're really trying to understand them, I think the relationship with that person just goes to another level. So in summary, it's worth it. I don't want to go through all the 11 points again, but you can listen to this video again if you want to get all the 11 points. Get the book. It's really worth it. But at the end of the day, it's important, I think, to really deepen the quality of conversations that we are having with the people around us, because that will deepen the quality of the relationships that we have with them, and that will deepen the quality of our lives at the end of the day.